I received an eviction notice for an apartment I'd vacated 3 months ago, and the landlord claimed I owed him $5,000 in property damages that never existed. 3 months ago, life seemed to be moving smoothly. I was living in a charming little apartment in Asheville, North Carolina. The cozy 2-bedroom had been my refuge for nearly 2 years. My landlord, Mr. Charles Henderson, a man in his late 50s with a warm smile and an affable demeanor, seemed trustworthy. We shared cordial conversations about the weather, exchanged pleasantries about local events, and from all appearances, it seemed like a straightforward landlord-tenant relationship. I was 28-year-old Emily Carter, a graphic designer, balancing remote work with exploring the local art scene. Trusting Charles came naturally. He had been attentive, promptly fixing any apartment issues, and he always accepted my rent payments on time. My lease had a deposit of $2,500, which he assured me was just a formality. Never had any trouble with any of my tenants, he'd often say with a twinkle in his eye. I believed him completely. Yet, looking back now, there were subtle hints that nagged at my subconscious. Once, in June, when I came to pay the rent, I noticed a stack of envelopes on his desk, many of which were marked with red ink as overdue notices. "Oh, just some clerical errors with the city," he shrugged it off with a dismissive wave. Another time, I overheard him on the phone, sounding frustrated. "I've told you, you'll get your money soon," he barked, quickly ending the call when he noticed me. I brushed these off, not wanting to pry into his personal affairs. In August, he began asking more questions about when I intended to move out. "No rush, just planning ahead," he reassured. It seemed odd, but I was indeed considering moving closer to family come winter, so I thought nothing of it. The letter arrived on a crisp October morning, at my new residence across town. I opened it with casual curiosity, my morning coffee steaming beside me. As my eyes took in the words, my heart pounded against my ribs, and my hands trembled, nearly spilling the coffee. An eviction notice for an apartment I was no longer living in, and a claim for $5,000 for property damage. I felt the world tilt slightly, a cold sweat prickling my skin. I rushed to my phone, dialing Mr. Henderson. "Charles," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I received an eviction notice for the old apartment and a bill for damages. What is this about?" His voice was far too calm. "Emily, I'm afraid you left the place in quite a state. We had to do extensive repairs." "That's impossible," I retorted, my voice rising. "I took photos before I left, and the place was in perfect condition." He sighed, an exasperated sound. "Those photos must be outdated. I have documents from the repair team." The call ended with more questions than answers, my mind racing. A week later, a neighbor from the old complex mentioned to me, in passing, how Charles had been telling residents I'd left the place in shambles and owed him a significant sum. My reputation, carefully built among those neighbors, was in tatters due to his outright lies. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. I started digging, requesting a copy of the repair documents from Charles, but he always had an excuse. Meeting with former neighbors, I learned he'd been telling anyone who'd listen about my supposed negligence. The further I probed, the more tales I unearthed. He'd apparently been using tenants' deposits to patch over his financial woes, concocting stories to justify keeping the money. Nights became my battleground. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts. My appetite vanished, energy dipped, and the once joyful spark I carried felt dimmed beneath the weight of stress. Calling in sick to work, I tried to regain some semblance of control, but the feeling of betrayal loomed too large, too suffocating. Then came the tipping point. An old friend, Sarah, who'd recently moved into the complex, called me late one night. "Emily," she said, her voice low and urgent, "Charles is saying you owe him thousands. But I know you, and I know that's not true." Something in her unwavering belief sparked within me a new resolve. This was not just about the money, It was about clearing my name and holding him accountable. I started crafting a plan. First, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find: emails, text messages, and those invaluable photos from the day I moved out. I consulted with my cousin, Mark, a lawyer, about tenants' rights and legal recourses. He suggested collecting testimonies from other tenants who might have faced similar issues. This was not only about my case but potentially stopping a pattern of deceit. I reached out to former tenants through a local housing forum. To my surprise, several came forward, sharing eerily similar experiences. Together, we compiled these stories, ready to present a united front. Every evening, I methodically organized documents, my determination growing stronger with each piece of the puzzle. The execution of my plan was akin to a high-stakes chess game. I sent Charles a formal letter, demanding the return of my deposit along with the fabricated damages bill, enclosing a detailed list of evidence. I quoted tenant laws, emphasizing my willingness to escalate the matter legally. The anticipation as I dropped the letter in the mailbox was palpable. My heart thudded, a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Then, I informed the other tenants of my move, encouraging them to do the same. Concurrently, we filed a collective complaint with the local housing board, ensuring our grievances were on record. I contacted a local news outlet, sharing our story, which they found compelling enough to investigate. The momentum was building, each step meticulously calculated. The day of reckoning arrived 2 weeks later. My phone rang, the number unfamiliar but the voice unmistakable. "Emily, we need to talk," Charles said, a tension in his tone I hadn't heard before. I invited him to a coffee shop downtown, choosing a public setting where he couldn't easily spin more lies. He arrived, the confident facade slightly cracked, a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. I brought Mark with me, introducing him as my legal advisor. "Emily, I think we can resolve this misunderstanding," Charles began, his voice attempting a conciliatory tone. "Misunderstanding?" I confronted back, the anger bubbling beneath my composed surface. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Charles. This is deceit." Mark leaned forward, his presence a silent support. "We have evidence that supports Emily's claim, and she's not alone. Others are ready to testify against your fraudulent practices." Charles paled, his bravado slipping. "Let's be reasonable. A court case isn't good for anyone." "Then refund my deposit and clear my name," I stated firmly, my resolve unwavering. He hesitated, the weight of exposure pressing heavily upon him. "Fine," he relented, voice barely above a whisper. "You'll have your money, and I'll issue a public apology." The apology came the following week, a letter to all tenants acknowledging his errors, a step towards mending the reputation he'd nearly destroyed. Word spread quickly, and with the news outlets' coverage, the community was abuzz with his misconduct, prompting a thorough investigation by the housing board. The consequences for Charles were swift and just. He faced fines from the housing authority and lost a number of tenants who no longer wished to be associated with his tarnished reputation. His once easy charm couldn't save him from the fallout of his actions. For me, the victory was twofold. Not only did I regain my deposit, but I also restored my name among my peers. The ordeal had taught me the power of standing up for oneself and trusting in the support of those around you. In the aftermath, I found a newfound strength, a resilience that emboldened me to take on new challenges with confidence. The satisfaction of knowing justice had been served was profound and empowering. I've moved on to a brighter chapter, living in a new space filled with warmth and promise. As for Charles, his business dwindled, his reputation beyond repair. I've heard he's since sold the property, unable to withstand the scrutiny and legal